Michael adjusted his collar for the third time, glancing at his phone. 7:58 p.m. 2 minutes until his blind date was supposed to arrive at Café Lumiere, a cozy spot tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop in downtown Portland. His sister Sarah had insisted it was romantic, but not too intense, whatever that meant. He'd reluctantly agreed to this setup after months of her pestering. Every Sunday dinner for the past 3 months had included some variation of just one date, Mike. She's perfect for you, trust me. When have I ever steered you wrong? Remember Jenny from college? He'd countered last week. That was one time. And how was I supposed to know she collected porcelain clowns? Fair point. Michael took a sip of water, watching the door. The cafe was exactly the kind of place he would have picked himself. Exposed brick walls, warm Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, the smell of fresh coffee and homemade pastries. A guy in the corner strummed an acoustic guitar softly, not performing, just playing for himself. It was perfect. He just wished his stomach would stop doing gymnastics. The bell above the door chimed, and Michael looked up. A woman walked in, pausing just inside the entrance to scan the room. When her eyes landed on him, she smiled. But there was something behind that smile. Something knowing, almost nostalgic. She was beautiful in an understated way that made Michael's breath catch. Dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. Green eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations. Wearing a simple black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. A silver necklace caught the light as she walked toward him, and Michael noticed she carried herself with quiet confidence. As she approached, Michael stood quickly, almost knocking over his water glass. Smooth. Real smooth. Michael? Her voice was warm, with a hint of amusement. That's me. You must be Emma, she said, extending her hand. Emma Chen. Her handshake was firm, confident, the kind that suggested she'd spent time in boardrooms or teaching classrooms, places where a weak handshake meant you'd already lost. Michael gestured to the seat across from him, and they both sat down. Sarah's told me a lot about you, Emma said, settling in and placing her small purse on the chair beside her. That's mildly terrifying, Michael admitted. My sister has a lot of embarrassing stories in her arsenal. Emma laughed. She kept it mostly professional. Architect, likes hiking, makes terrible puns. Once tried to build a treehouse that collapsed 3 hours later. Michael groaned. She told you about that? I was 12. And to be fair, I'd never actually studied structural engineering at that point. But you do now, every day. Buildings are much less forgiving than 12-year-old me anticipated. The waiter appeared, a college-aged kid with gauges and a friendly smile. They ordered drinks, an IPA for Michael, a glass of Pinot Noir for Emma, and the usual first date small talk began to flow. Where do you work? Emma was a guidance counselor at Roosevelt High School. How do you know Sarah? They worked together at the school. Sarah taught English. What do you do for fun? Emma loved hiking, painting, and had recently gotten into pottery. Michael shared his own interests, sketching buildings that didn't exist yet, trail running, cooking elaborate meals that sometimes worked out. Sometimes? Emma asked, eyebrow raised. Last month I tried to make homemade pasta from scratch. Ended up ordering pizza at 9 p.m. because I'd created what could only be described as Italian rubber bands. Emma laughed, and Michael found himself relaxing. She was easy to talk to, engaged, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually listening, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was studying him, waiting for something. There was an intentionality to her attention that went beyond normal first-date nerves. About 20 minutes in, as he was telling a story about a client who wanted to build a house shaped like a sailing ship, on a landlocked property in Bend, no less, Emma tilted her head and interrupted gently. You don't remember me, do you? Michael froze, his water glass halfway to his lips. The background music suddenly seemed very loud. He set the glass down carefully, searching her face. There was something familiar, but he couldn't place it. A kindness in her eyes, maybe? The way she tucked her hair behind her ear? The slight asymmetry of her smile? Should I? Emma laughed softly, but there was no judgment in it. Just something tender and a little bit sad. 15 years ago, Lincoln High School. You were a senior, I was a sophomore. Michael's mind raced backward, fumbling through memories like old filing cabinets. Lincoln High. He'd been so focused on college applications, soccer practice, hanging with his tight-knit group of friends, Tom, Jared, and that kid everyone called Socks for reasons no one could quite remember. Sophomore year would have been 2010. The memories were hazy at best, filtered through time and the self-absorption of teenage years. "I'm sorry, it's okay," Emma said, leaning forward, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. "You wouldn't remember. We never actually met." "Not really. Not in any way that would have stuck out to you." "Then how?" "It was October 2010, homecoming week. I was new to the school. We'd just moved from Seattle after my parents' divorce. Didn't know anyone, had no friends, was eating lunch alone in the library every day because the cafeteria felt like walking into a shark tank." Michael felt his chest tighten. He'd been that kid once, briefly, in middle school after his best friend moved away. He remembered that particular kind of loneliness. Emma continued, her voice gentle but steady. "I was sitting at a table in the back, near the reference section that nobody used anymore. I had a sandwich I couldn't eat because my stomach was in knots. I was crying, trying to hide it, but not doing a great job. You probably don't remember this, but you came in to return a book. Some thick fantasy novel with a dragon on the cover." Michael tried to recall, but came up empty. He'd read a lot of fantasy books that year. "You were walking past, heading to the checkout desk, and you stopped. Just stopped and looked at me. I thought you were going to make fun of me or tell me to stop being dramatic. That's what kids did at my old school." Emma's expression softened. "But you didn't. You asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just allergies," which was obviously a lie because it was October and I was clearly falling apart. She paused, taking a sip of her wine, and Michael found himself leaning forward, drawn into the memory that was hers but somehow becoming his. "You didn't push it. You didn't ask a bunch of invasive questions or try to fix anything. You just sat down, pulled out your lunch. I remember it was a turkey sandwich and an apple, and started eating. You told me about this ridiculous thing that happened in your calculus class, something about your teacher, Mr. Henderson, accidentally sitting on a student's calculator and then spending 10 minutes trying to figure out why it was beeping and vibrating in his pants pocket." A flicker of recognition sparked in Michael's mind. Mr. Henderson, the calculator incident. It had been hilarious. The whole class had been crying with laughter. Michael had told that story 100 times that semester, perfecting the delivery, the timing. "You made me laugh," Emma said quietly. "First time I'd laughed in weeks. You sat with me for the whole lunch period, didn't make it weird, didn't act like you were doing charity work, just existed next to me, made me feel less alone. Then the bell rang, and you said, 'Library's a good spot, quiet, I'll probably see you around.'" Michael closed his eyes, and suddenly he could see it. A girl with a sketch pad, dark hair, always sitting in the same spot, near the window where the afternoon light came through. He'd seen her drawing while he ate his lunch. They'd barely talked, but there had been a comfortable silence. "And you did," Emma continued. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, you'd show up during lunch with your sandwich and your terrible math jokes. You'd sit at my table, eat, sometimes do homework, sometimes just sit there. We didn't talk much. You'd ask what I was drawing sometimes. I'd show you. You'd tell me about soccer practice or college applications or some movie you'd seen. It was normal. You made me feel normal. How long did we? 2 months, give or take. Until I finally made some friends. Jenny Marsh and her crew adopted me after we got paired for a history project. After that, I didn't need the library anymore. Started eating in the cafeteria. You were always surrounded by your friends, so I never got a chance to say a proper thank you. And honestly, I was 16 and awkward and didn't know how to tell someone they'd saved me without making it weird. The word saved hit Michael like a punch to the chest. "Emma, I didn't save anyone. I just ate lunch. You don't get it," Emma said, and for the first time that evening, her voice cracked slightly. "That October, I was in a really dark place. My parents had just finalized their divorce after 2 years of screaming matches. My dad moved to California. My mom was working 2 jobs and barely home. I was in a new city where I didn't know anyone, and I felt completely invisible. I'd started thinking that maybe it would be easier if I just wasn't around anymore." Michael felt his throat close up. "Emma, I'm okay now," she said quickly, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. "I'm really okay. But back then I wasn't. And then you showed up, this random senior who had no reason to sit with the weird crying sophomore in the library. You showed up twice a week, every week, and you made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth sitting with, worth telling stupid jokes to. And slowly, things got better. I made friends, I joined art club, I found my footing. She pulled her hand back, wrapping both hands around her wine glass. I carried that with me. Through high school, through college, through my marriage and divorce, the knowledge that there are people in the world who show up for strangers, who do kind things without expecting anything back, who sit with people in their loneliness and don't make them feel broken for being lonely. Michael didn't know what to say. His eyes were stinging, and he was suddenly very aware of every person in the cafe, the guitar music that had shifted to something melancholic and beautiful, the way the light caught in Emma's hair. When Sarah mentioned she wanted to set me up with her brother, Emma continued, and she showed me your picture. I couldn't believe it. The guy from the library. I had to know if you'd become the kind of man I thought you'd be back then. And? Michael's voice came out rough. Emma's smile was radiant, lighting up her entire face. I think that guy who showed up for a lonely sophomore without being asked, he's still in there. You've spent the last half hour asking about my work, my interests, my thoughts on everything from school, budget cuts, to the best hiking trails in the gorge. You haven't checked your phone once, even though I saw it buzz at least twice. When the waiter came by, you made sure my water glass was filled before your own. When I mentioned my divorce, you didn't probe or make it weird, you just nodded and moved on. These little things, they add up. Michael felt heat creep up his neck. That's just basic decency? Emma finished. Exactly. That's who you were at 17, and that's who you are now. Do you know how rare that is? Most people grow up and get harder, more cynical, more focused on themselves. You didn't. You're still the guy who sits with people in libraries. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years and the strange miracle of reconnection hanging between them like something tangible, something sacred. The waiter returned to take their dinner order. Michael ordered the salmon, Emma the vegetarian risotto, and as the waiter left, Michael cleared his throat. So, he said, a smile tugging at his lips, this is probably the weirdest thing I've ever said on a first date, but would you like to start over? Maybe create some new memories I'll actually remember this time? Emma laughed, and it sounded like sunlight breaking through clouds. I'd like that, but fair warning, I'm going to remind you of this conversation on every anniversary. Every anniversary? Pretty confident for a first date, aren't you? Well, Emma said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and warmth, you've already got a 15-year head start on being the guy I'd want to end up with. Might as well make it official. Michael raised his water glass, suddenly feeling like the luckiest person in Portland, possibly the world. To terrible timing and second chances. Emma clinked her glass against his, the sound like a bell marking something beginning. To the guy in the library who stayed. As dinner arrived and the conversation flowed into easier territory. Movies they loved, travel dreams, embarrassing stories from their respective professions. Michael couldn't help but think about the strange architecture of a life. How one small act of kindness could echo forward through time like ripples in water. How the people we help might remember us better than we remember ourselves. How we're all just walking around, bumping into each other's lives, leaving marks we'll never fully understand. Emma told him about her students, the one struggling with college applications and family problems and the weight of figuring out who they wanted to be. Michael told her about buildings he'd designed, the satisfaction of seeing something he'd sketched become real. Solid, permanent. Do you ever sit with any of them? Michael asked. The students who seem lonely? Emma smiled. Every chance I get. I keep granola bars in my office drawer. You'd be surprised how many problems get a little smaller over a shared snack and some bad jokes. That's really beautiful, Michael said softly. I learned from the best, Emma replied. They stayed until the cafe closed at 11, talking through dessert and coffee, the conversation never once hitting an awkward lull. When they finally stepped out into the cool October night, Portland's city lights reflecting off low-hanging clouds, Michael walked Emma to her car. I had a really good time, Emma said, unlocking her door but not getting in yet. Me too. Best blind date of my life. How many blind dates have you been on, including this one? One. Emma laughed. Smooth. Michael shifted his weight, suddenly feeling like 17 again, nervous and hopeful. Can I see you again, maybe this weekend? There's a new exhibit at the Art Museum. Contemporary architecture meets traditional painting. Thought you might like it." "I'd love that," Emma said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she stepped forward and hugged him. Not a brief, polite hug, but a real one, the kind that meant something. Michael hugged her back, breathing in the scent of her perfume, something floral and clean, and feeling the strange rightness of this moment. This woman he'd forgotten and remembered and was meeting all over again. When they pulled apart, Emma looked up at him. "Thank you, Michael, for then, and for tonight. Thank you for remembering," he said, "and for giving me a chance to do better this time." As he drove home that night, Michael thought about the sophomore in the library, the girl he'd almost forgotten, the one who'd remembered him all along, and he made a promise to himself to pay more attention, to sit with people, to show up, to be the kind of person worth remembering. 3 years later, Michael would stand at the front of a small garden ceremony, watching Emma walk toward him in a simple white dress, carrying wildflowers they'd picked together that morning. He'd think about that sophomore in the library, the one he'd almost forgotten, the one who'd remembered him all along, and he'd finally understand what she meant that night at Café Lumière. Some people walk into your life twice because the first time was just the prologue, the introduction to a story you didn't know you were writing. The real story was only beginning, and this time Michael would remember every single moment.